that you have conflict with. So the patience is not about who will give up first. When we seek patience, it's not about pushing the buttons of the other person and then I prevail by just holding up. And usually, like if you talk about marriage, um, it's like sometimes the couple are in a patience war. Whoever is more patient, they tend to focus on having the children as booty. So they try to upset the other person, so the other person will lose patience, and therefore the one who has patience and maintains patience will be able to be focused and end up being with the children because they're more stable and so forth. So these are just some examples of when we ask for patience from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to be patient for the sake of the truth, being authentic in that conflict. So it's not about us winning versus the other person losing. So today, in today's talk, I will be talking on step number 2, which is really to take the first step. In many times, in many conflicts, we see, well, they didn't care, so they're not coming to me to apologize. It's common to wait for the other person to do the first step. And if we're sincere about resolving conflicts, and if we reflect on the danger for having a conflict with a relationship in our lives, whether it's a brother or sister, a parent or child, a grandparent, a grandchild, or even a neighbor or a friend, these are all dangerous for us to have these conflicts with any of these people, because the Prophet ﷺ said that we're not supposed to have any conflicts with anybody for more than 3 days. So anything beyond 3 days is considered a sin. So therefore, waiting for the other person to take the initiative can lead to a sin. So therefore, after we seek courage to confront this conflict and take positive steps to move forward, we need to be empowered. We need to feel empowered that we can resolve this conflict. We don't have to wait for the other person to come in. So therefore, we need to take the first initiative. We need not to start blaming the other. Well, they hurt me, they insulted me, they did this, they did that. Then therefore, they're supposed to come and resolve the conflict. I don't have to. It's not my fault. We've heard that so many times. So when we're resolving conflicts, we need to we need to be authentic with ourselves. We need to be truthful to ourselves. And being truthful to ourselves when it comes down to conflict resolution is, why am I resolving the conflict? Is it for me? Is it for my pride? Is it for the other person? Or is it for the sake of Allah? Right? There's no doubt we'll benefit from it, because removing the conflict is going to be a reward for us, and therefore it's not a hindering force that will hinder us from entering heaven. Because I spoke in previous talks, the impact of someone dying and having conflicts in this life, unresolved conflicts, there's some serious consequences if we die with conflicts with people. So therefore, we need to take that first step. We need to take that initiative on ourselves to help ourselves, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remove that conflict. And many of us would think, yes, it makes sense. I'll just take the first step. But realistically speaking, there are sometimes many things that hold us back, prevents us from making that step. In many cases, it's pride. Someone's pride, especially when the conflict between an older person and a younger person. Somehow, some cultures differentiate based on age. The common thing in some cultures is like, if I'm older and a younger person insulted me, therefore the younger person needs to come and apologize. I don't have to lose my pride and my status in my family, in my community, in whatever, in my neighborhood, whatever the case might be. I don't have to lose that status in order for me to lower myself, to bring myself to the level of the child, and I start the conflict resolution. So that keeps many people from taking that first initiative. And let's not take it really in a big scale. We can take it at a small scale. The father and a son, or the father and a daughter, or the parent, any parent and the children. Usually the parent would not talk to the child. I mean, that's common, until the child comes and apologizes. And sometimes you see that one of the parents talks to the child to convince that child to go and apologize for the dad or for the mom. And the child is like, well, the child may have some justifications, whether it's right or wrong, that's not the point. But what I'm saying here, even if you're the adult and the child was that you have a conflict with the child, do not hesitate to initiate, to take the initiative to resolve that conflict with your child. Don't wait. It doesn't have to be done from the child to come to you, or from the younger one to come to you, or from the person who is a lesser status in the community. Some communities are focused on financial status, for example. So if a person he's seen as unwealthy or poor, or doesn't live in a very nice neighborhood, or maybe he's pumping gas or something, and there's a conflict that happen between you and that person. It doesn't mean that because he's from that social status makes him lesser than you are, and that's not an excuse for you to wait for him to come because you have a higher status. That's pride. And I just want to spend more time today and focus on pride and dignity, because we are, as human beings, especially as Muslims, we are dignified and we are encouraged to have dignity. But there's a difference between pride and dignity. And today I will be discussing the difference between these two to understand really what is really keeping us from reaching out to resolve a conflict that we might have in our lives. Anybody would like to share their perception of the difference between pride and dignity? Anybody would like to share their perception of the difference between pride and dignity? And it's okay to, yes please.
Dignity is something that you have and you should have, but maybe that, at least to me now at this moment, before I listen to you, pride tells me not to lower my dignity.
Pride
not
tells
to lose my dignity.
Pride tells you not to lose your dignity.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's how you
I'm
see.
just talking now informally.
Yeah. Yeah. This is very informal. I mean, this is very. I mean, it's a discussion more than a talk, really. Okay.
So, is this a right vision of the two, or?
Well, I really appreciate. Thank you for sharing your perception. Inshallah, we'll hear some more, and I will collect from everybody, inshallah, and we can discuss it further. Abdurrahman, the sister in the back. Assalamu alaikum. I was looking for you earlier.
Pride comes with ignorance.
I'm sorry?
Pride comes with ignorance.
Pride comes with ignorance.
Yeah. And dignity comes with the right knowledge.
And dignity comes with the right knowledge. Jazakallah khair. Anybody else would like to share their perception or their understanding? Okay. If you think of something, stop me. More than happy to hear from you. So what I heard, that pride comes from ignorance and dignity comes from knowledge, and the brother was saying that pride prevents me to lose my dignity, and these are the two. That's how they perceive it, which is really interesting stuff. It's good to see more about this, and I will share with you what I found. And it is stated that pride is external. Pride is external, and dignity is internal. Pride is self-image. Pride is self-image. It feeds self-image. Dignity helps us grow and nurture ourselves internally. Pride boosts superiority, and dignity, it enables humility and being gratitude, to have gratitude, humility and having gratitude. Pride is a commodity that we store and we keep for ourselves. And dignity allows us to be generous and share with others. Pride is a button or a switch that is controlled by others. And I'll talk more about that. And dignity is a switch or a button that is controlled by ourselves. So it's an internal switch or internal button. I don't know if you heard this terminology or the metaphors, like he pushed my button or she pushed my button or pushed the wrong button, you know. That's the external being pushing the internal button, or the external button is being pushed by an external person. So we'll talk about the first one, comparing feeding self-image versus nurturing ourselves. So when we look at our accomplishments and what we have accomplished in our lives, if we see that as who we are, so if we identify ourselves with what we have and what we do versus who we are. For example, it's very common in many cultures. The parents tell the children to be doctor, lawyer, or engineer, right? So these are the three common desired occupations. And if the focus was not right, and if the cause behind that occupation is inaccurate, the focus is about the status of the social, or having the social status. So the child will grow focusing on having that 2 letters and a dot before their name. DR dot and then the name. And that's how they see things. So when they grow, they only see themselves as a doctor, as a title, as opposed to a person or family that teaches the children to help people. And the child would say, I want to help people the best way I can. And then the child becomes a doctor. And then he or she sees herself or himself as a person who helps people from the medical point of view. Regardless whether they have a DR or they're being called as a DR or doctor so-and-so or not, they're still they see themselves as a person who helps. So in reference to what you mentioned earlier, if you have the knowledge, if you use that knowledge as a way to identify yourself, then we need to check, are you really so it's either you're holding yourself accountable because of that knowledge, and that's where dignity comes in, versus you using that knowledge to shine up, to focus on your self-image, to make sure people calling you as a doctor or as a lawyer, such and such, but you're not seeing yourself accountable for that knowledge that you have, that you can give back to the society, for example. Is that concept clear? Any questions on that? Any comments anybody would like to add to that? So that's what the earlier statement was talking about, feeding the self-image versus nurturing ourselves. Because we can feed ourselves, but if it's not nutritious, if it doesn't have enough nutrients, it will be useless, really. It's just filling the stomach, but we're still weak. We're still lack energy. We're not able to move around. But you see, like you stuff yourself with food. But that's where what feeds the face or the self-image is all about. It just feeds it, but it's really not nurturing. It doesn't grow it. Versus the dignity is something that we have inside us. The more we focus on how to grow it and how to be able to use it to share and to put it out and provide it for other people, the more we are dignified, regardless of our status or the status of the people that we are being dignifying with. So an example, many people see, there's a common saying, is like you are, what does it say? It said like something like you are what you have of money. I forgot what the saying is saying, that you are is how much you have, or something like that, in terms of money worth. But according to a study in Princeton University in New Jersey, they found they did a study on the amount of income that would make a difference. The more income you make, that would impact your happiness and your status of well-being. And they found, this is in the US, they found that the threshold, it would make a difference if you make up to $75,000 a year. And that's not a lot of dollars, by the way, especially in New Jersey. $75 is not a lot. But they said that anybody who makes more than $75,000 a year, more money doesn't really impact happiness as much. It's not as significant. So this study shows that you need some money to give yourself the basic needs. And there's a theory by Maslow. I don't know if you guys know. It's Abraham Maslow. He's a psychologist back in the 1940s. He came up with this pyramid or hierarchy of the basic needs for us to be happy. The basic things we need to have is biological needs. We need to meet our biological needs or physiological needs. The second thing is security. So if we have food and shelter, then that is the foundation of our happiness. And then there'll be like the family and so forth. There'll be like more stuff on top. So that research is showing that if you have the basic income to give you that sense of giving you food, giving yourself food and your family, and shelter, that's the basic and the most significant part of our foundation to happiness. And we see this also mentioned in the Quran. So Maslow's theory came in 1940s, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran in the 6th century, in Surah Quraysh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Quraysh that He gave you food and shelter. So having more money from point of view from Quraysh, it only gave them what? Pride. It gave them pride. The basic needs that they would have for them to be happy and to have their dignity, in a sense, is really to have the basic needs fulfilled for food and for shelter, for being safe. So being safe also has a law, that you have a law, you have something to protect you, not just a shelter as a house, but that could be enough if you're already in a city or in a country that has that shelter. But for Quraysh, they had shelter, they had law, they had a lot of things to protect them and give them the sense of security. So these two basic things are sufficient, and they are not really, they're not in a way to help in anything beyond that. It can, if it's not perceived in the correct and a healthy way, it can be only seen as feeding the self-image. So therefore, if we want to expand our knowledge, if we want to expand our wealth, if we want to increase our ability to address conflicts, we need to look at it from a dignifying point of view. And it's not, you won't be losing your dignity if that's what your focus is on. So, but if we were to have a pride and we were to focus on removing that conflict, it's very likely that pride will be fractured. And if the pride is fractured, it causes the hurt, the anger, and all the other feelings that come along with it. So let me give an example. If I were to be, for example, focusing on my self-image as a parent as opposed to my child, and my child comes and insults me, he says, you know, what you did is stupid, something like that. If I'm focusing on my pride, I would be hurt. I would be hurt and maybe angry. And someone, if he's hurt or she's hurt, they might slap the child, they might yell at the child, they might put the child in timeout forever. Timeout, I mean like in consequence, you know, they put him in a consequence because of their hurting the parent. So that's if I am hurt because of my pride. But if the child, you know, told me that, you know, what you did is stupid, and if I'm focusing on my dignity, then I shouldn't be feeling hurt. I would like to understand why he thinks I'm stupid. So I would ask him, what makes you think that I'm stupid? And I wouldn't be hurt because I am being authentic with myself. This is, I see it as an opportunity to grow myself. If I did something stupid, and if I were to focus on self-image and how I look in front of my child, or maybe he insulted me in front of my friends, maybe, for example, that's even worse. My self-image is really destroyed in front of my friends, and they tell me, you let your child call you stupid? What kind of a parent are you? And if I'm authentic with myself, I would see this as an opportunity. I might learn something, or the child might learn something. But I am in no way losing anything about my dignity. I still care about myself, I still respect myself, and I'm addressing that issue with my child without being hurt, without being insulted, feeling insulted. Because maybe I did something stupid. Or maybe the child misunderstood me. So therefore, if I'm focusing from my pride, I would lash the child, I will scold him, I will do something that maybe to hurt him back. Because I'm defending what? My pride. But if I'm not focusing on my dignity, then I would lose the opportunity to grow my strengths inside me, to grow who I am. Any questions or comments on that? You're smiling. Does that mean you have a comment, or any questions or comments on that? Mm-hmm. The social status, meaning as what do you mean exactly? The way Islam differentiates us as a human being is based on our piety. أكرمكم إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. The best amongst you is the one who is the most pious. So that doesn't reference to any education or financial status. So a person who would be pious maybe doesn't know how to read or write, but he's pious. And in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's much better than a person who's maybe a doctor or a professor or whatever, scientist, right? So the status, that's the only form of status in Islam. And it is understandable that cultures do have status, and especially when a person goes and wants to marry another, wants to marry a sister or so forth. The common question is like, what do you do? How much money you make? Can you open a house? Can you support a family? And it's all about financial specifics. But hardly they look into his piety. Hardly they check on his behaviors in the prayers, for example, or habits that he might have, or something like that. So the focus on that status is not encouraged. That focusing on that status. Now, in regards to for a person to focus on having wealth, being wealthy, there's nothing wrong in that. Actually, the Sahaba, if you look at the wealth of the Sahaba, they're multi-billionaires if you compare them to today's people. They're multi-billionaires. One person supported the whole army. I mean, that you never heard of that. So they were wealthy, but that didn't differentiate them or give him anything special or different status in the society. So there's a bit different. I mean, when we talk about pride and dignity, dignity doesn't mean you pursue your dream of being a doctor or being a lawyer or being the best at whatever it is that you want. It is. You can. I mean, you can focus. Yeah. Yeah, the most knowledgeable when it comes to knowledge is the one who benefits Muslims. The knowledge in Islam, the knowledge in social science, that is from an Islamic perspective, from a psychological science, and from an Islamic perspective, because these sciences also can represent a devious look at how things are perceived. But if we have it from an Islamic perspective, then that is a very useful science for the community, for the society, as long as it is within Islam. Yeah. So a doctor, for example, and I'm using a medical doctor because it's from a social perspective seen as a prestigious job. But if a medical doctor doesn't pray versus like a garbage collector who prays, there's no doubt in the sight of Islam a garbage collector who prays is much better than a doctor, right? So from the Islamic point of view. But if the doctor is praying and he's dignified and he's focusing on dignity, then it doesn't matter if the garbage collector came and slapped him in the face. He wouldn't be upset. He would seek to grow, his understanding of himself, of knowing, nurturing the self that he has. For example, would ask the garbage collector, "Why did you hit me?" instead of lashing back at him or attacking him, regardless of his status. Does that make sense? Especially if it's like amongst his patients. It's very, very difficult for a person, like he's respected in a society, amongst the people, or maybe his clients, and a person comes and lashes him. You want to defend your pride. That's the natural things that we do, is that we want to defend. And we're not defending ourselves, really. We're defending our pride. And therefore, when we are dignified, we focus on taking the opportunity to gain from that conflict. Yes, brother. Why, yeah.
Example, the child was beneficial.
Can you put it closer?
The example of the child was very beneficial.
Okay.
However, do you agree that the child should be taught not to speak in such a way to his father?
That's a very good point. So the question is that when the child comes and talks to the child, he's like, that's a stupid thing you've done, or you're stupid to do this, or so forth. And the question is like, do I think that the child should be taught not to speak like that to his father? Yes, there's no doubt about that. But you don't have to get upset with him. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, a man was pulling him from the shirt and he causes marks on it. He didn't yell at him. He didn't lash at him. He just tried to understand, what is it that you're not happy about? It's like, well, you gave so and such to so many people, but you didn't give me anything. He said, you see this herd of There's all these cattle, or was it goats? Or he said, "Oh, these are all for you. Are you happy now?" He said, "Yes." Then he took it. So it was not another thing. The man who peed in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, can you imagine what would happen to that person if he did it today? If today in Medina you saw someone peeing in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, do you know what would happen to him? I can only imagine. It's not a pretty picture. It's not a pretty picture that I'm looking at right now inside my head. But the Prophet ﷺ said what? Leave him. Let him finish. Because it was not pride. The Prophet was not looking at the pride of himself, about his masjid, about his community, about he was focusing on this as an opportunity to grow. Not only the person who was peeing in the masjid, but also the whole community learned. And then the Prophet corrected that behavior. Right? So the same thing for the child. He would make a mistake, and that's what we expect our children to do. They don't know. They've never been in a child-parent schooling. They never learned how to properly, address elderly or address the parents. They don't know. So they can make mistakes, right? So therefore, how we address it, we don't just focus on the mistake. We focus on what caused that person, that child, to say these things. So what drove you to say that? And that's a very common question the Prophet ﷺ would say. He wouldn't say why. The Prophet ﷺ wouldn't say why, because why is more investigative. But the Prophet ﷺ would say, "Ma hamalaka ala hada?" What caused you? What drove you to do such a thing? Yes, brother. Microphone. You think you need to stay in here?
Sheikh, mashallah, how you are describing pride and humility, or dignity rather, is helping me understand the two words better. When you are describing pride, the person that comes to mind is Fir'aun. But you highlighted that his power or his pride comes from other people who have to acknowledge his power. Once his people stop acknowledging him, then the power disappear, or his pride disappears. So he's in a converse way, he's actually weak, because he depends on the millions of slaves to uphold him. Whereas our Prophet ﷺ had an opportunity to destroy a whole village in Taif, but he didn't.
Jazakallah khair.
Right?
Jazakallah
In fact, that is actually more powerful. So that's the two contrasts that I'm picturing in my mind as I listen to you.
Jazakallah khair. That's very good. That's very good example. These are two very good examples. And the trip to Taif did not impact the Prophet ﷺ's focus. He still continued to stay focused. And he even asked for more, we said earlier, to seek for patience, to seek, before you resolve a conflict, you seek for patience, you seek for help, for guidance, for wisdom from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these challenges that when we encounter should not impact our drive, should not impact our self-image. It doesn't matter really how we look, it's just a matter of how does it impact us inside us. Does it change who we are? It shouldn't. If we're strong inside us, it shouldn't impact us no matter what happens on the outside. And that's exactly what you said, the example of the Prophet ﷺ in the trip for Taif. It didn't change him inside him, but it was a challenge. He was bleeding because of that trip. So therefore he asked more guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more help. And what happened after that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the opportunity to guide the jinn, the unhuman, just to show that his message is beyond human, is not just about human. So that's where we seek Allah's help in our endeavor in this life, in everything we do, especially when we face challenges. And conflict is definitely a challenge. And resolving a conflict is even a more difficult challenge. So therefore, when we want to put ourselves out and seek forgiveness and start the resolution, you will be faced with rejection. Just like with the Prophet ﷺ, every prophet tried to reach out. When we spread the message, we are really resolving conflicts. in the beliefs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the conflict that we are resolving from that point of view. But it's all pretty much the same concept. It's just that how we go about implementing it. The second one is when pride boosts up our superiority versus dignity, gives us the ability to be, enable us to be more humility and give us more gratitude. So pride with the self-image it gives us a point of reference of whom we are in respect to others. I'm employed, he's not employed, I'm better than him. I make 5,000, he makes 3,000, I'm better than him. And therefore I only focus for those who are lesser than me to make myself feel better. That gives me the sense of superiority. So pride gives us that sense of superiority. It doesn't give us that chance of humility and gratitude. So if I have a job and seeing a person who doesn't have a job, I'd be grateful. It's an opportunity to help that person. Maybe he doesn't have enough money. But a person with pride wouldn't see it that way. But a person who's dignified would see this is an opportunity for me to be showing who I am, regardless whether I have a job or not. I'm a generous person. I give. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the believers for those who give for His sake in comfort and hardship. They give in comfort, meaning financial comfort, or in financial hardship. So they still give. So if that's who you are, then you're focusing on dignity. If a person is, for example, overweight, it doesn't mean that they overeat. But we tend to think that if I'm fit, and I'm physically fit, and I'm not overweight, the other person is lazy, not working out, eats a lot, then I'm better than him. That's very pride focus. So we need to change, and we focus on being dignified. So from a conflict point of view, we see ourselves, from a pride point of view, I am better than that other person. I didn't call him or her names. I didn't call her names. I kept my silence. But sometimes in a conflict, silence can be lethal, can be brutal if you're silent. It doesn't mean silence is always good. Silence can be good. But you don't have to curse back. You can talk. You can express the feelings. You can express how you feel or how the other person made you feel, for example. It's if we go to someone's home, some people visit other people's home, they see it unorganized. They think these people are messy. They're not organized, they're messy people, they're not clean. But it could be an opportunity to ask about how the family's doing. Maybe the mother who is responsible for cleaning the house or getting the organ, she's sick, maybe she's in a hospital. Maybe the father who's maybe responsible for cleaning the house, he's in the hospital. It's an opportunity so the idea here, giving ourselves that natural comfort of being superior, we need to challenge that. We need to challenge that, and especially when it comes down to resolving conflict. So therefore, in a conflict, and to be dignified, we need to focus on looking at the other person as a human being, that they are trying their best. They are trying their best. So when a child comes and calls me stupid, he is or she is trying her best or his best to express how they felt. And that's the best that they could do. If I'm in a conflict, for example, with my wife, with my brother, with my mom, and they started calling me names. It can be hurtful. It can make me sad. But that shouldn't impact who I am. Shouldn't impact how I see them, as they are human, just like me, trying their best. And that's their best. That's the best that they can do. So that should not divert my focus from taking the opportunity to resolve the conflict and only focus on myself and how is that making me feel, how does it make me look, for example. So that would divert the focus on me, and that's pride that I'm trying to protect. Like the brother said, pride is very easily fractured. You can deflate pride. Pride is just like a big, very thin balloon. Anything can scratch it and it deflates. So no matter how much you protect it, it's very insecure. However, dignity is internal. It's inside you. No one can reach inside you. It's protected by nature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us that. No one can take it from us. Any questions or comments on that?
I have a question again about the child example.
Sure.
Because different people, also in Islam, look at it differently. I remember once that there was a small exchange of views with my son, and a family member who was also a scholar, he said, okay, he's right, but he should say it in a nice way. And he gave the example of saying off to your parents from Quran.
That's right.
So you see my point.
Yep.
You can interpret this point very differently, because some people, so in fact the message that person gave me is that you should tell him not to talk to you that way. For instance, you just said stupid, saying to father.
Yep.
Maybe the child should be taught, okay, I know the children are in the learning process, so you should not expect that they're perfect, but still, they should respect the older. And we come again to the social status. Knowledge was, in my view, at least the way I feel now, is that age also makes a difference in Islam.
Yeah.
So it gives you a kind of social status.
Yep. Very true.
So, well,
how do we balance?
But yeah, I'm
okay.
thinking of the balance,
Yes.
because otherwise we will always have different views.
Sure. Sure. And if your son maybe in here, he would probably use this.
He's next to me.
Okay, and he would just tell you, you need to listen to it.
No, but we have very good relations.
Of
but
course,
I just gave one example.
Yes. Yes.
As how culturally
Yep.
some people.
Yep. Yep.
I'm from Afghanistan, so
Yeah, I can imagine.
in that culture,
It has that the age status.
Old has very important say.
and they're very well respected as well.
Yeah, very well respected.
Yes, absolutely. And the Prophet ﷺ told us
They
that.
even decide sometimes in a jirga what should be done.
For a certain
Of course,
circumstance.
everyone would say their views. It's a very nice democracy. They just sit down and they decide about an issue.
MashaAllah. That's great.
But
But how they do it, and it needs to be done in a very respectful
way.
way.
For the whole group or summarizes is an elder who is knowledgeable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's very true. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that that the young must respect the elder. It's not just a culture in Afghanistan; it's a culture in Islam. Yeah, and the older must have mercy on the younger. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "He's not amongst us who does not respect the elder, and does not have mercy on the younger." This is a hadith. So the idea here is not about accepting his misbehavior. The idea here is to gain focus on the opportunity that you have. And when the child is taught right from wrong, is different from being lashed at and being scolded. Because if the child is, maybe you're having a dispute, or maybe if I'm having a dispute and point of opinion, difference of opinions between me and my child or my younger brother or so forth, I would expect him to talk to me in a certain way. And I sense that he is getting hostile in how he's talking to me. And I'm inside me, I'm getting like, oh, this is my expertise. This is me thinking. This is my expertise. I know about this more than he could ever imagine. Who is he to come and challenge my point of view? That's going inside me, right? That sound or that feeling that I am experiencing inside me is really what is causing me to be upset. And what I'm saying here when it comes down to conflict, don't focus on that, because that is coming from pride. That is coming from me better than him, superiority. Or me, I might lose respect for myself if I lose this argument. So my focus is really to win the argument. It's not about learning something. You see what I'm saying? I'm not talking about not to address the behavior, the bad behavior. I'm saying that's a secondary. Focus on the relationship. Building that relationship by focusing on what is causing it inside you to be defensive, to lash back. Even if the person is lashing at you, you need to absorb it in yourself. You need not to look at the lashing, you need to look at what's happening. So in the example of disputing an argument with a younger person, I'm more knowledgeable about it, then I need to have my wisdom. If I'm more knowledgeable, then I need to focus on sharing my knowledge that I think I have with that person. So instead of going, no, this is how it is, no, then I will just take his opinion and walk him through the logic. I mean, it's just different way how we go by it, but this is just an example. So I would go along with, I would humble myself. That's the humility. I would humiliate, I would give myself I humble my knowledge and bring, if I feel that I'm this much higher in knowledge than him, I would bring my knowledge to his level and work with his logic and build that logic with him to build that same knowledge that I have. That's really the sharing. But if I'm here and I'm telling him, you're down there, and he's saying, I'm down here because this is the right thing. And he's thinking, no, this is the right thing. And everybody's talking from a different perspective. So by focusing on the opportunity is to bring yourself down, you're not going to lose your dignity. You will not lose your dignity because you know who you are. You know you're knowledgeable about the topic. And you're just seeing it from his perspective. You see what I mean? And then you walk through it. After you're done with that, you might come to an agreement and you might not come up, end up with an agreement. After that is done, you can address the behavior. You can say something like, I noticed during this I felt upset how you, for example, raised your voice at me. And I feel, that was inappropriate, and I just would like to get your attention to it. Don't tell the person what you're expecting, what you want. Let them feel that what is inside you. Because that gives them, especially when it's a child, it gives them empowerment to fix it. Because it's their choice. And if they take that choice and they apologized, then that should mean, for me, from my point of view, if I share my my feelings and I felt like I was upset when you were doing this, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry that I upset you, I didn't realize. The fact that they say I'm upset, I didn't ask for an apology, and they did apologize, that sounds to me more sincere than I would ask for the apology. Because I can say like, oh, I'm not going to talk to you until you apologize. I can say that. But it's not going to mean the same. Not for me and not for the other person. But when I express what the other person did to me by saying how I felt because of what they did, it gives the other person empowerment. They're not challenged anymore. They're free. You're giving them freedom to lash at you more or apologize. And that's the difference. So I'm not saying do not address the misbehavior. We need to address it. how we address it is very different from being lashing back or attacking back or defending our pride or what we think was good for ourselves. You're welcome. I hope that explained the point. The balance, right? It's all about the balance. Because here's the thing, when it comes down to, I had couples. I do counseling, so I had couples, parents and children. They talk to each other. The child feels the parents don't care, and the parents want the child to listen. And I asked the parent, if your child thinks that you don't care, if your child thinks you don't care, why do you think he should listen to you? You should address the fact that he thinks or she thinks that you don't care first. Oh, they're not listening to me. But he's saying you don't care. That's why they don't listen to you. So you address really that conflict from a child's point of view, from your son's point of view. And you address why they think that you don't care. Well, it's a perception. Well, you need to work with that perception. After you work with that conflict, then you can teach, but not demand respect, because we don't demand respect. Demanding respect is really focusing on self-image. But teaching respect is totally different than demanding respect. The difference is clear? Is it? Okay. So when someone is dignified and sees someone overweight, maybe it's an opportunity for this person to be grateful, for example, for what they have. To see someone who is less fortunate, to be grateful. And to be also like share if they need any help, for example. For if for some people who go like work out or in gyms or walk in the neighborhood in the morning and stuff like that, they can reach out and see. If you, for example, if I, for example, have a routine every morning, I wake up and walk, and I see my neighbor sometimes does it, sometimes doesn't do it, and I see this person is like overweight, I would see that an opportunity. I would reach out to the neighbors, like, I've seen you sometimes come and sometimes you don't come. Do you want to like remind each other? Because I also have problems being consistent. You're reaching out to help the person, but you don't focus about him, being, overweight, that because he's being lazy sometimes he's not able to get off the bed, because we are easily judging people like that. We can easily judge people based on what we perceive what is right and what's wrong. But if we focus on us being dignified, we would always allow ourselves to be generous and reaching out and sharing the people around us. So I'm going to stop quickly for any questions or comments. Yes, brother. Can you repeat so everybody can hear?
How do you know that? How do you deal with elders who demand respect? And even Islamically, because they're older, because say that even your parent or your uncle was older, because they think they've had a lot of experience and they think they're right. But you've got Islamic evidence against it.
Do you think they earn respect?
And they deserve the respect because they're older.
So then focus on yourself.
Yeah.
Focus on yourself, because we cannot change other people. So the quick answer is really, make sure that doesn't impact you, who you are. But if they are demanding it, it's between them and themselves. But if you feel that they deserve it, then you should give it, regardless whether they demand it or not. So because in yourself, you see yourself as a respectful person to the older. So that shouldn't change. No matter what people do on the outside, it should not change who you are in the inside. And as long as we're focusing on who we are as people, as human beings who are trying our best, we are also thinking of the other person as a human being trying his or her best. So that's the best way they could do. Sometimes it's not easy to reach out to an older person and teach them, because it might not be respectful. So it's a sticky situation, but just focus on how is that impacting you, and make sure that it does not change who you are. Does that answer your question? Okay. So I said earlier that it's a button or a switch that pride is a switch people own. It's a switch inside you, but they have it. But dignity is a switch or a button that is inside us that we have. We switch it on, we switch it off. Anybody can give me their understanding of what that means? What does that mean to you? Anybody would like to share? Brother, you want to come back? You're okay? So what does it mean that pride is a switch that is, it's turn on and off inside us, but other people have? Yes.
There might be things that we value that if it's crossed, then we should go against and we should act.
Can you speak closer?
There might be certain
Is it
things.
on? It doesn't look like it's on. Is it on? Okay.
There might be certain things that we believe that is right, and if they cross that line, like other people, they might not have the same values, but we might have those values that if they do that certain such and such, then we will act in like.
Very good. Jazakallah khair. Very good. Any other thoughts? Anybody would like to add? A lot of smiles, but nobody's raising their hands. That means just positive thoughts. So the switch being in other people's hands is how they are impacting you. For example, we said about superiority. Having superiority because you have what? You have a brand new car. Next year, your car becomes old and someone else has a brand new car. And then you feel like, oh, I'm no longer the person who has a new car in the block. So that inside you makes you feel like I'm less important than last year. So I need to go buy a new car this year. Or having a specific income, for example. You're making the next amount of money. And you know such and such person making more money is like, whoa. Because that, what you have, having that much income, is that how you saw yourself? And that give you the sense that you are better than others. And when someone else has that more money or more income, then you see yourself as lesser than the other person. And the more you hear people doing the same job as you, they're making more money than you, the lesser you view yourself. So they are really switching that self-respect button for you, because they turn it off, you don't have self-respect anymore because they're making more money. So that's self-respect owned by them. They decide if they have more income, they share that with you, they turn off your self-respect. You have no self-respect anymore. You don't see yourself as the same as the others. Or it could be anything else. Being respected by the younger. We said this child example. You feel like you are respected by everybody, and when a child comes and disrespects you, you feel disrespected. So that switch of respect is actually in the hands of the child. He turns it on and he turns it off. When he yells at you, you feel disrespected. Who's owning it? It's really the child is impacting how you feel. So we have the same thing in relationship. If the wife or the husband acted a certain way, it tips off the partner. If the wife acted a certain way, the husband will be reacting based on how she did it. And if the husband did a certain thing and would switch on the wife in a certain way, so it caused these conflicts, but these conflicts are caused by the other person. It's impacting us. So therefore this button, this switch, in us. So that makes us very weak, very vulnerable. And people really own how we feel. We gave them that power. We're not empowered anymore. And that's what pride gives us. So therefore what we do in return, when we have all these people around us have all these possibilities of turning on so many switches inside us, what we do is we protect ourselves. We protect our pride. And what happens when we protect? We sometimes build walls. We build fake images. We build fake, whatchamacallit, like brand. We can like start branding ourselves to keep our brand. It sounds like a personal brand. But all of these things, really what we build around us, maybe it's protecting our pride, but it's also preventing us from reaching out. It's preventing us from reaching out. We end up being ourselves in this little bubble that we created around us to protect our pride, and our pride is sitting right next to us. And then we end up, so the way we respond, it can be, we respond to, in such situations, we respond either by isolating ourselves from the people. So therefore, we don't talk, we don't express, we just keep it in, quiet, at least quiet. The Prophet said, be quiet. The quiet is gold and speaking is silver. I'll just be quiet. But it's actually, that's not a healthy quiet, because it's eating inside you. You're protecting yourself, you're being quiet, you don't want to lash back. But in conflicts, we don't lash back, we don't keep it inside. We need to learn how to express. How do we talk without lashing back? Another thing that would happen when it comes down to when we are in a conflict and we're focusing on our pride is we attack back. We attack back, and that's the second possible response. And the third possible response is that we start competing. We said the patience war. I started to talk the patience war, but that's one of the ways to compete in conflicts. It's like, who's gonna be, less patience? Who's gonna lose the patience war first? And then you go in this duel between you and that person that you have a conflict with. And it's that you're competing with the other person to make yourself feel better, to make your pride protected, basically. So therefore, pride is insecure because it's impacted from what is outside. And dignity is secure because it's inside us. It's naturally protected. So when somebody insults us, we retaliate. We go, it's like, how dare you? You call me this? Well, you know what? Well, I've been keeping it inside me for all these years. Well, you are this, you're this, your mom is this, your dad is that, and you start naming our whole family because you've been keeping it inside you. But that, when the person insulted you, you feel like so much hurt, you need to retaliate. Just like gangsters. I've seen movies with gangsters. Movies with gangsters, like when you insult the main gangster, just go. You need to go fight for your pride. You just go tell you tell the followers in the gang to take revenge and to retaliate against that person who was disrespectful to you. Because from a pride point of view, disrespect is unbearable. It's very, we as pride gives us this such great sense of protection for the self from being disrespected. So that means when we are in this situation, it's something that we need to reflect on. Is that very likely what is happening when I get upset with someone insulting me? When someone insults me, when I get upset, I need to check: am I really that fragile inside me? Am I that fragile that I got hurt by that person calling me a certain thing? Because if the person calls me stupid, does that mean I'm stupid? Not likely. He thinks I'm stupid. Okay, good for you. if that person cares for me, I would like to understand, I would like to change his opinion or her opinion. But if I don't care about that person, he can think whatever he wants. So it shouldn't be really important for me what that person think of me, unless that person really means something to me. Then I wouldn't lash back. I would like to understand, why do you think I'm stupid? So self-worth is not fragile when you're focusing on on yourself of being who you are, regardless what people call you. So self-worth is regardless what people see me. I see myself respected, even if people call me stupid. But there's a balance there, right? There's a balance. Sometimes people might ask you to improve in something, or you're wrong at something, but we don't need to be in denial. So there's a difference between in denial and being protective of pride. We can talk more about that. But here we're focusing only the differences between pride and dignity. Because if we are dignified and someone says that you're stupid, then maybe I'm stupid. So this is an opportunity for me to learn. So then I'm not in denial. So them calling me stupid doesn't really change who I am. I always want to improve myself. So if somebody says that you're wrong, oh, okay, well, what's the right thing to do? What's wrong? What did I do wrong? Or how could it be, how can I do it better? How can I fix it? Always reach out to improve. So therefore, if our self-worth is so fragile, we always demand respect from others. We always demand others to admire us, to like us, to accept us. Otherwise, we will not be able to live if the person does not like me, or so and so left me. I feel like I'm worthless. And sometimes it also, when the pride is injured, right, when it's fractured by the outside forces, and that's why we want to protect it, because when it's hurt, when it's fractured, when it's inflated or deflated, when it's deflated, we want to protect it from us to feel vulnerable. We don't want to feel vulnerable. And in a conflict resolution, if you're not feeling vulnerable, well, you're not ready for conflict resolution. If you're not ready to feel vulnerable in a conflict resolution, then you are expecting the resolution is going to be by the other person changes. And that's not going to happen. We cannot change other people. So in conflict resolutions, we need to be comfortable in being vulnerable. And being vulnerable feels like expressing how we feel. Not just feel it inside and protecting the pride, but actually express out, the behavior was hurtful for me. And let's talk about it and see how we can improve that situation. So in conflict resolution, it's very important for us to be having a congruence, to be incongruent internally, to be at peace. And to be incongruent, we need to focus on three things: ourselves, the others, and the situation. If we're focusing on ourselves only by protecting the pride, then we are not giving any regard to the others and to the situation. We're not addressing the situation, we're not addressing others' needs, others' perception. When we focus on others and not taking ourselves into account, then we're not being fair to ourselves. So we end up being pleasing others and taking it in ourselves, keeping it to ourselves, and then eventually maybe explode or detach yourself from that relationship suddenly overnight or something like that. When you focus on the situation and not focusing on others and not focusing on yourself, you're missing the chance of learning and share the knowledge with the other person. So therefore, for us to be having this to be incongruent with ourselves, is we need to balance between focusing on ourselves, on others, and as well as the situation. So I'm going to stop here, close with that, and then see if there's any questions or comments from anybody. and maybe we can conclude after that. Any questions or comments about what I spoke about or the examples were given? They want you to? Okay. So the brother is asking, if you have a conflict and you think they're wrong and you're right, but they feel that they want you to admit that you are wrong, and you're partially right. You feel that you're partially right. Okay, so the situation, let's pick one situation. Is it by evidence that you're right? Okay, by evidence you're right. They think you're wrong, and in order for the conflict to be resolved, they're asking you to admit that it's your fault, so the relation goes back to normal. Is that your question? Okay. Anybody wants to suggest a solution? Like you're evidently you have the evidence being right. Is that based on their behavior as not Islamic? Is that what it's about? Okay. So then what's the conflict? They're saying what? You need to accept that it's Islamically correct to do that, and it's haram, for example. It's like it's clear for you it's not an acceptable thing in Islam. Right, and that's why it's important to understand the situation. So help me understand. So, okay. So say let's say something else. It's an opinion, point of a point of a perception, and you think you have the evidence that you're right, and they feel that you're wrong, and they're telling you you need to admit that it's your fault for this relationship to go back to normal. I'm trying to think of a general answer, because these are very sounds like a specific scenario. Yes, sister. Yeah, so he's saying that if you're in a conflict that you feel that you have evidence that you're correct, some kind of a deal between you and another person, and the other person feels that he's at fault, and in order for them to resolve this issue, then he would need to admit that it's his fault, like pay dues or something. Yeah, so then the answer is like, in order for me to forgive you, you need to pay me that much money, even though the contract is clear that much money does not belong to the other person. Am I hearing it correctly? Okay. So then the question is, how do you deal with that conflict? You have a contract? Okay, so if it's evident, then I'm interested to know what's the evidence. Is there a contract? If there is a contract, then you need to have a judge to judge between you two. That's the best way to do it. Because when it comes down to sales, it's really different conflicts that we're talking about. If there's no conflict, if there's no contract, then you would need to. There are certain procedures to go by. But you're talking here about business conflicts. And business conflicts the relationship is only, it can be only business related, or it can be a business, it can be a relationship, can be a business relationship with someone that you already have a relationship with. Then if that's the case, for example, if you're in business with your brother, and this conflict is from your blood brother, and this conflict is between you and him, you had an understanding and he had an understanding, you think that you have the evidence but he doesn't, for example, then you need to focus on the relationship. Do you want to continue that relationship with your brother? That should be your focus. Yeah. Yeah. So the focus is really about how is this conflict impacting you, because you need to be authentic regardless. You need to be focusing on the truth, and also you need to be fair to yourself and to the other person. So taking it up on yourself, that's really a decision that you would need to take. If you were to take it on yourself, is that an opportunity for you to improve the knowledge on the other person? Is there an opportunity for you to gain and share knowledge with the other person? It's really up to you in that sense. But the most important thing about that conflict that you mentioned is, what is it that you want from that relationship? Is the relationship meaningful to you? Then you focus on the relationship, maintaining that relationship, right? And you would think about, you know, how to go about to focus on keeping that relationship. It's not about giving them what they want versus what you want. It's not about that. The focus is being really truthful. So you would reach out to tell them, it's an opportunity for you to tell them to focus on, what to focus on. You know, you would say something like, for example, again, I don't know the details, and that's why I kind of feel awkward to say general answers, but you would focus on, you know, teaching the other person to see the opportunity that you have. It's not just the money. It's like an opportunity for us to learn. Let's go reach out to ask someone to get, you know, someone else's opinion and so forth. So it's really about you being in control, that is not impacting you, not impacting who you are. You're just staying authentic in that conflict. Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, as I mentioned, because if you have a contract, then you need to have a judge. And they need to know that regardless what the judge says, you love them, you respect them, and it's just about, you know, the contract. It has nothing to, you need to reach out to these people. It's not about them. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about you being right or wrong. So that's what I mentioned earlier about the opportunity to teach, you know, to share with them the knowledge that you have, to show that, to share them your perspective, you know, to share with them the opportunity that is at hand for them to focus on instead of focusing on the money, for example. You see, it really depends on how much that relationship means to you. So that's just a quick general answer, really. Any questions on ask about what I mentioned? Yes, sister. We don't have the microphone. He stepped out. Can someone help with the microphone? Jazakallah khair.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So my questions regarding, let's say, in work environment. So, I mean, generally, like, how do we deal with the high expectation from our boss? Let's say, maybe in our work, the task that we're assigned to. So maybe we got some challenges or difficulties that maybe our boss are not, whether he's aware or not, or maybe he would not like to address it, or he would not like to acknowledge the difficulties that we're facing. So basically that would create a sort of conflict between us and our boss, because he has high expectation. And at the same time that we're facing these challenges or difficulties, he may not acknowledge it. So generally, what is your opinion? I mean, how do we deal with the high expectation, let's say, in a work environment?
Sure.
Yeah.
If in any conflict that we face in our lives, if it's impacting us, it's making us feel stressed, making us feel uneasy, making us feel that the other person is doing something to us, as I mentioned today, take the initiative. Do not hesitate to take the initiative. And I said before, the sessions I've done before you do that, you need to seek help and guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the people who know. So you need to do these things beforehand. You prepare yourself and you seek guidance and help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you take the initiative. Now, taking the initiative is really about, like, for in the example, the question that you mentioned, it's it depends on what is it that you want from the conflict resolution. If you want to change the other person, then don't expect much. Just to tell you that much, right off the bat, is not really, we don't have that power to change the other person, fortunately or unfortunately, but that's the fact of the matter. But many times we talk to other people to change them. If that's your focus, then you can try it, but I haven't seen it successful. If your focus is to gain knowledge, to make the other person gain knowledge about how it's impacting you, then you need to prepare. You need to take steps on how to present that to the other person and how it is impacting you. It's not about what they did or what they're doing. Is that how you feel and how you are struggling based on what they're done. So you always say I, and then you say because of this. So you don't say you are, if you label the other person like you are asking us things that are impossible to do, or you have high expectations. His guards are already built. He will not listen to you. He will just, so therefore you need to be able to express how you felt and still keep that communication. That relationship is still on. It's not shut off. Because you don't want, if the other person has pride, you don't want the pride to step up and protect itself. So therefore you need to talk about how it's impacting you. So if that's the focus on really sharing to the other person how it's impacting you, and to maybe seek help from them how you should do it differently, for example. I mean, there are different ways on doing that, but there are so many skills that we do in the corporate world. Is like there are quite different many things that we can do in the corporate world. For example, you confront this issue with a specific objective, and you focus on the objective and not the person. And this just goes along to what I mentioned earlier. It's how it's impacting you, but it's not really expecting the other person to change or to label them, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Have a goal from that talk, specific goal that you can focus on achieving, that would make you feel less of the issue that you're dealing with. So it would reduce that conflict inside you. Maybe it's causing conflict, or maybe it's causing stress to yourself. So then you would set a goal for yourself on that discussion with that person, with the boss.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with what you say. At the same time, you see, there's for the relationship between let's say an employee and an employer, or a boss, and there's for let's say for a subordinates. I think there's some obligation for us to to step up, or for us to go to his level. That's an obligation. What do you think about that obligation? I mean, we feel like we're obliged to follow his ways.
Yeah. My question then, you would need to ask yourself, if you do not meet his expectations or her expectations, what does that say about you? If you think of yourself less, then you need to work on that, because that should not impact you internally and how much you respect the best that you're trying to do, because we are all human trying our best. So if you are, as a human, trying your best, regardless how he sees your efforts, should not impact how much you respect yourself. And if it does, then you need to do something about it. Okay? Last question or comment? Last question or comment? Okay, there is no last question or comment. Okay, subhanakallah bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.